Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Upgrades. I'm Jeremy Knoll.
And I'm John Suarez.
And of course, that's Malcolm in the background. And in this episode, we're going to talk about the Prismari Performance deck from Commander 2021, headed up by Zaffai Thunder Conductor as the commander. It is Conductor. Not
It
Collector,
is.
Not Collector.
It is. 100%.
So this is the one that we actually got to preview the entire deck for. Make sure to check that episode out, and we talk a lot in depth about our thoughts on the cards that are already in the deck, so we can probably not have to go over too many of the cards we're going to cut at the end here. But we will talk about some of the cards that we would put into the deck. And there are 4 that we actually both agree on for this one. Why don't you take it away with the first one?
Sure. So the first card I added to the deck, because obviously this deck is all about casting spells and copying them, was Double Vision. 3 colors, red, enchantment. Whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell in a turn, you get to copy it, which is exactly what you want to do with Magecraft.
Yeah, not much else to say about that one. That one's just a very good card for this deck. It allows you to trigger and the cast and the copy, either one. So depending on what you're doing. The next one is another pretty simple one in a Spellslinger style deck, and that is Goblin Electromancer. There's not really much to say about that one. It's basically in every red-blue instants and sorceries deck you're going to be playing. It's a 2/2 for a red and a blue. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less.
Yeah, fantastic card. Is everything you want for this kind of a deck.
Yep.
My next card, again, is about copying spells, and that is Ral Storm Conduit.
Mm-hmm.
So, 4 mana Planeswalker. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 1 damage to target opponent or Planeswalker. And then has a +2 to scry 1 and a -2 of when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, you copy it. So, just another one of those kind of... It's no surprise that blue and red have plenty of these effects. So,
yeah. Lots of those kinds of effects have definitely been building up over the last few years for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this deck really, with the Magecraft, really takes advantage of a lot of that. And it's really where people want to be with that Spellslinger style deck. So the last one is one that we both agreed on, and that is Blue Sun Zenith. And that is obviously a very powerful draw spell because you draw X and then it shuffles right back in. But it's also really great because Zaffai cares about the mana value of the spell that you're casting. So you're probably going to be able to get to 10 with this one pretty easily and be able to just get that extra ability right off the bat. So
for sure. Yep.
And of course, as we talked about in the Lorehold Legacy deck or the upgrades episode, we talked about how I went over it and I was like, oh man, I completely missed the fact that Blasphemous Act isn't in this deck. And of course it's in this one.
There it is. That's why they didn't put it in the last one.
Yeah, they just can only have it in one deck, apparently.
Yeah. And my next card is another card they've put in a bunch of Commander decks. I'm surprised wasn't in this one.
Yeah.
So the next 2 cards I'm going to cover are both X spells, and that is Comet Storm. This card has been printed many times now at this point. X, red, multi-kicker 1. You can choose any target and then choose another target for each time the spell was kicked, and it deals X damage to each of them. Now, I get that most of the time you're probably you're gonna multi-kick it, so that doesn't add to the mana value for Zaffai, but still, it's still a giant X spell. And if I happen to spend 4 on the X or 5 on the X, I get the 4/4 out of Zaffai at the very least. I might not get to randomly hit somebody for 10, but still very, very cool.
Yeah.
And my next X spell is one I would definitely recommend in this deck, and that's Starstorm. Was surprised that it's not in here. So the Starstorm has cycling 3 if you just want to discard and draw another card, but it's also an instant X red mana, deals X damage to each creature, which is pretty sweet because Zaffai's a 1/4. And Zaffai also makes 4/4s, right? So if you spend 5 mana on this card for 3 and 2 red, you can kill everything in play that has 3 toughness and get a 4/4 out of it and still keep Zaffai.
Yeah, for sure. And then if you D2, you can make it really big and take out.
If you
a
need
bunch
to
of
kill
stuff.
everything, you can.
Yeah. So my next one is another X spell, and that's Electro Dominance. Another one that I think is very cool because it allows you to cast extra spells, and it says red X deals X damage to any target for an instant speed, and you can cast a card with converted mana cost X or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. So you just get that extra advantage out of it. And I think all of these cards work really well in this deck. And one of the cards that I like in this deck that works well with them is the what is the name of that? Elementalist's Palette. I had to remember, because that's a new card that really cares about X spells and gets you more and more mana the more and more X spells you cast. So adding in more X spells to the precon will really help that out. I love that card so much.
It's a sweet card.
Yeah.
It's a sweet card.
So
let's see. So I'm going to hop down on my list. I'm going to go over an enchantment for 5 mana. It is Arcane Melee. It makes instants and sorcery cards cost 2 less. So it's double the Goblin Electromancer ability for a little bit more mana, but it's an enchantment, which means it's much harder to get off the battlefield. And this card's going to be great in your X spell themed deck, which is basically what we're playing.
Yep. Yeah, it's great in that deck. It's not just yours. You do have to know that.
It's everyone's. It's everyone's.
It is everyone's. Yeah, so you do have to know that going in. Instance,
but you're going to make more use of it.
But you are going to make way more use of it, but you just have to be aware of that going into it. But it's still fantastic card.
Yeah.
My next one is one that I really like to add to decks where you're going to try and be, building up your mana so that you can play those big X spells later, and that's Spell Swindle. So not quite, mana drain, kind of an expensive, card. So Spell Swindle costs 5. You counter a spell, but then you also create X treasure tokens, where X is that spell's now mana value. So you can actually, counter somebody's 6 or 7 mana really big spell, get those treasures for later, really pump them into one of your big X spells to be able to utilize Zaffai's extra abilities. So
it's a sweet card.
Yeah.
It's a nice alternative to mana drain.
Yeah.
So my next card is Insidious Will. This is a 4 mana, 2 colors, 2 blue, instant. Choose one, you can counter a spell. You can choose new targets for a spell. You can copy target instant or sorcery spell and choose new targets for it. So you can, play it defensively if you need to stop something your opponents are doing. If you want to copy one of their spells, you can, which will trigger Magecraft, right? Mm-hmm. And if you just want to change the targets of a spell, you could do that. Real sweet card. A lot of options.
Yeah, I really like that one. That's a great one to pick up. My next one is a really big spell, and so this one's not an X spell, but it will trigger Zaffai's ability for 10, and that is Volcanic Salvo. It is 10 red sorcery. It does cost X less to cast, where X is the total power of creatures you control, and it deals 6 damage to each of up to 2 target creatures and or planeswalkers. So it's really good because you can just hit 2 creatures for 6 or a problematic planeswalker, and then you also get to dome one of your opponents with Zaffai's ability. So, and I just think it's fun, and I think it's a really good. It has a really nice home in this deck.
It does. It's nice and cheap, but it's also 12 mana.
Yeah.
Fun card.
It's just a fun card.
My next card is something that I put in almost every blue deck that I play, and that is Narset's Reversal. 2 blue, copy target instant or sorcery spell, and then return it to its owner's hand. You could choose new targets for the copy. Excellent, excellent card in this deck. Triggering Magecraft is just something you want to do every time you have one of the Magecraft cards. This will make sure that happens. It also buys back your spell. Or it can just, stop your opponent's spell for a turn and give you a copy of it.
Yeah, and I love that spell too. And I definitely, again, oversight a little bit on my part, but that is a fantastic, fantastic card.
The card is $5 right now. I would advise getting it because it's never going to stay $5. That's just too powerful of a card.
It's
unique. It's got Narset in its name, so it's not something that you could just reprint at any point normally.
Yeah, it's going to have to be either like a specialty print. It's going to have to be in a Commander Precon or a Commander Legends kind of deck.
Something like that.
Something like that. So you can't just reprint it into any whatever main standard set. So my next card is one that I was thinking about with Spell Swindle. I was trying to think of other ways to be able to just really build your mana. And I was like, well, Crewfix is a wonderful card for doing something like that. Luckily, we have an artifact that has that ability on it, and that's Horizon Stone. It's a 5-mana artifact. If you would lose unspent mana, that mana becomes colorless instead. So if you keep all your mana up to be able to cast an instant, like a counter spell of some sort, and nobody plays anything that you really want to counter, tap it all, put it all into Horizon Stone, and it just becomes color, So and then you just use it on your turn. Play one of your big X spells on your turn or later if it's an instant. It's a solid card, and it's only like $1 right now. So
yeah, it's a sweet one.
Yeah.
So my next card was actually the first card on my list before we rearranged things. So I was wondering where it went. But this is a card we actually talked about in the preview of the Prismari deck. Mm-hmm. We'd mentioned immediately would be the first card we would add to the deck, which is Una's Grace. It's very subtle. Just 2 colorless and a blue instant. Target player draws a card, but it has Retrace. So you can discard a land card to cast it again, which is a very, very powerful ability in this deck. This deck has a lot of ways of abusing things that are played from the graveyard. And Una's Grace is going to be one of those ways.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely one that we talked about in that Prismari Performance preview. So make sure, again, check that out for all of our thoughts on all the cards that are new cards that are in the deck for sure.
Yeah.
My next one is an enchantment that is a bit more expensive, but if you're going to be doing things like playing Horizon Stone and Spell Swindle to really build up your mana, it shouldn't be too hard to hit Cloven Casting. It is a 7-mana enchantment, 5 blue, red. Whenever you play a multicolor instant or sorcery spell, you may pay 1. If you do copy that spell, you may choose new targets for the copy. So if we're going to be playing a lot of our instant sorceries that are, multicolor, it's a really easy way to be able to just get that copy out that we want.
Mm-hmm.
We're all about copying. So if you kind of build your deck a little bit more around this, a lot of the ones that we're suggesting right now are more monocolor big spells, but you can definitely tailor your deck around something like that if you really want to.
Yeah. And my last card is a land, and that is a Mirror Pool. Mirror Pool comes into the battlefield tapped. It taps to add a generic mana to your mana pool, or a colorless mana to your mana pool, and then you can pay 2 generic and a colorless, tap it, sacrifice Mirror Pool, and copy target instant or sorcery you control. And you can choose new targets for it, which is good. You need to make sure that you have specifically a colorless mana, but this deck does have a decent amount of them between Mage Ring Network and Mirrored Landscape and Reliquary Tower and Scavenger Grounds and some other stuff. Mirror Pool also just has another ability of paying 4 in a colorless, tap it, sacrifice it, and you could put a token on the battlefield that's a copy of a creature you control. Probably not the ability you're going to be activating most often. You're probably going to be getting your Magecraft trigger from the middle ability.
Yeah.
But very, very cool land that copies spells. It's exactly what you're looking to do.
For sure. My last one is one that has definitely been in a few precons, and I have cut it sometimes, other times I've played it, and that's Nivick's Guildmage. And it's one that I'm kind of on the fence about, but I do like the ability that it has both abilities that are pretty relevant in this deck. Mm-hmm. One is 1 blue-red, draw a card, then discard a card, and as we said, being able to draw the extra cards, discard cards, and getting them in the graveyard is still relevant. And then the other one is 2 blue-red, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. Again, just another way to copy spells that you're playing. It is a little bit more expensive at 4 mana, but it's always there if the creature sticks around.
You have a bunch of cheap cantrips in this deck between Brainstorm and Ponder and all of those, so you have plenty of cheap spells to copy.
Yeah, so just another way to copy. There are other ways in the deck to be able to play that. Things like Dualcaster Mage and stuff like that you can play and copy things. But I think that this is a pretty solid one, just to stay out there, and especially on a budget because it is an uncommon. So it's pretty easy to pick one up. So for the next part, we're going to talk about a couple of cards that we would take out. We did talk a little bit about this in that preview video, but didn't go super in depth. So we're going to only talk about a couple of cards rather than going through 10 of them or so. So the first one for me is one that is from Strixhaven, and that's Resculpt. It's 1 in a blue instant, exile target artifact or creature. Its controller creates a 4/4 blue and red element or creature token. It's fine, but I think that there's other ways that you could be dealing with, especially creatures. There's other ways you can be dealing with them. very, very easily in this deck. Artifacts, you're going to have to play something like a Vandal Blast or, things of that nature. But there are other ways of dealing with it. And being like giving your opponent a 4/4 for that is a little higher rate than I think I'd like.
Yeah, you have to use that offensively more than you would like.
Yeah, for sure.
So I cut a couple of cards. I'll go over them. One is a new card, and that's Inferno Project. It's a 7 mana trampling elemental. When it comes into play, it enters with X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the total mana value of instants and sorceries in your graveyard. We added a bunch of X spells, which don't have a huge mana value in the graveyard. Yeah, you also have multiple Delve spells in the deck as well. So this is a very expensive creature in my mind, that it's just not something I want to do, in all honesty. And the other card, which I feel like we've seen this card many times in Commander decks, is Living Lore. Just take that one out of your deck. It's just not good enough. It's got a lot of words, so it tricks you sometimes into thinking it's really cool, it's really good. It's not worth it. Plenty of better cards you can play.
Yeah, those are a couple that we definitely went over in the preview video. Mm-hmm. The last one I would take out is Call the Skybreaker. We did talk about how Una's Grace is great with the Retrace. This is another Retrace card, but it's a little bit more costly. It's 7 mana for a 5/5 elemental with flying. So it's fine, not great.
Yep.
It's
not
definitely,
what I want to be.
Yeah, just definitely one of those where depends on what you want to be doing. I don't think I want to be playing that. I want to be spell slinging way more than I want to be retracing. This does kind of go with Gavin Verhey at an SCG Con a couple years ago did say that he always wants to make sure he has something to do with his mana. Mm-hmm. And this definitely goes along with that idea. But I think Una's Grace is just a better way.
It's going to draw you.
Yeah, draw you an extra card. So
the last card I cut is probably fine to keep if you want to, but I don't like giving opponents things when I don't have to, and that's Humble Defector. Drawing 2 cards and then giving it to your opponent. You get to play a little bit of political game with it, which is nice. But I feel like every time I've given this card away, I never get it back. It's probably because of Steven, but either way, I'm not going to take the risk. I'm just going to cut it from my deck.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, if you're the person who casts it and then uses it the first time, it's probably not.
Yeah, I've never gotten a Humble Defector back, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, so that is our upgrades of the Prismari Performance deck for Commander 2021. Make sure to let us know what cards you would add into the deck in the comments below. Also, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. I'm Jeremy Knoll for John Suarez. Thanks for watching.